Philip, I'll ask you a question.
Mhm.
I wasn't quite clear what you were saying about the 4 living creatures in Revelation.
Well, because they had wings, and
Yeah.
one of them was the head of a bull and an ox. That is a very common type and statue throughout Assyria and Samaria. The winged bull is very, very common in Babylonia, throughout Babylonian history, as well as winged lions and sphinxes and winged dinosaurs and all that sort of thing. So I'm pretty certain that the winged bull almost certainly came. I know Ezekiel wasn't written down until about the 7th century, after all of that, well, after a lot of that.
Right.
But I do believe that Noah brought the Toledoths, as they were called, the transcripts through the flood, and that all of these concepts from the Torah could have been common knowledge throughout the ancient world after Noah came out of the ark, especially through Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So I believe that that knowledge about the 4 living creatures, or seraphs and cherubs, was common. A lot of these creatures are called caribs or cherubs in pagan literature.
Right.
So that has come from the Bible. Cherubs spelled with a K, or Kereubs. What you mustn't ever mistake cherubs for are those repellent little babies in Renaissance painting. Vomit making. They're nothing whatsoever to do with cherubs. Cherubs were fearsome creatures in all of that district, and they were trying to commonly they were winged bulls. That's why I believe they came from the 4 living creatures of Ezekiel, also mentioned in Isaiah and revisited in the book of Revelation.
Right.
That's my personal conviction.
Yeah, I might come back on that one sometime, because I'm
If
not.
you've ever been to the British Museum, you can see those massive winged bulls.
Yeah, I've seen those. Yeah, they're amazing. But there's something there that's I'm not quite clear about. So I will come back to you some other time, probably next time.
Well, as I see it, because we've got this, they imagined a constant 2-way transmission between heaven and earth, that these winged creatures were bringing all throughout the world. You've got this occult idea that avatars and fallen angels and demons are bringing information down to us, and we're constantly wearing wings to try and get up there. Think about the guy that flew too near the sun, Icarus. That wasn't Greek. That was a legend way before Icarus. That's about Prometheus taking the knowledge of the gods. That's Satan giving the knowledge to Eve. None of these, Adam and, the Shakespeare.
Yeah.
All of these people are all drawing on these ancient stories.
Yeah.
They're throughout all of history, all of literature, and they're very, very common. And all about stealing Pandora is Eve. What did Pandora do? She opened a box, filled the world out with the knowledge of good and evil. She's Eve. That's Eve. They're all based on the Bible, so that knowledge must have been there. Must have been there.
Right. Okay.
From the get-go, as it were.
Yeah. I have to think all that through. Okay. I don't want to hog the thing, but
Well, later, later I'll be sending a PDF of the slides to Randall, who will dissipate them from the rooftops.
Right.
To any who want the slides, you see.
Right.
They come out as a PDF, which is quite low resolution. So it's all down in blue, in red and white.
Isn't J.K. Rowling attributed her story times, all those ancient studies?
Oh, yes. Yes. I mean, you look at Carl Jung, one of the favorite so-called psychologists in the church. He said he got his ideas from demons. I mean, this is very, very widespread. This is very, very widespread. And they're ever ready to whisper in our ears and then what have you. It's a very common concept throughout the world. I mean, you think of C.S. Lewis now, he was using Jungian archetypes, as it were, you know, these common themes through earliest times. Sorry?
The whole C.S. Lewis thing is difficult, isn't it? Because
Yes.
he had this idea that, well, I'm not sure what his idea was, but he thought that ancient people had got sort of little bits of the truth. And he seems to think that God is all right with that.
Yes.
Will include it all.
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe is the masterpiece, and it's wonderful, but not sure about some of those things.
Well, look at Tolkien. I mean, lots of writers like that.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Using these ancient archetypes, so-called. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, when it gets really evil is this the successor of A.K. Rowling, Philip Pullman. Now he's just plain evil.
Yeah.
At least in Rowling there's black and white, as in Tolkien, but not by the time you get to Philip Pullman.
Yeah.
That's pure evolutionary bullshine. I mean, that's absolute garbage. Parallel universes, spiritual evolution, the lot. You know, that's Philip Pullman. He's very, very bad.
Yeah.
It just gets worse and worse. I don't know who the latest one is. To regurgitate. Well, look at the Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. When I was at Manchester University, Professor John Allegro was still translating the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then he came up with a book that said Jesus Christ was the fly agaric mushroom, fertilizing the church. That's Professor of Hebrew at Manchester University. Yeah. And so the permutations are just endless. The final Babylon the Great is going to be Satan's masterpiece, but it won't last very long.
Fortunately.
Yes.
Come Lord Jesus.
Yeah. We ain't seen nothing yet.
No.
So the most famous representation, as I'm sure you all know, of a woman riding the beast is Zeus and Europa. And that was in Greece from the 8th to the 5th century BC. And this is the famous story. Europa was the beautiful daughter of King Agenor of Sidon, Phoenicia, which nowadays is Lebanon. Later, the continent of Europe was named for her. Europe didn't have a name at the time. One night Europa had a dream of two continents in the form of women arguing over Europa. It doesn't say what the other woman was. Anyway, Asia maintained that since Europa had been born in Asia, she belonged to it. Asia must have been the other woman. Sorry. The other continent, which was nameless, contradicting myself there. I'll start again. Asia maintained that since Europa had been born in Asia, she belonged to it. The other continent, which was nameless, said despite her birth, the god Zeus would give her that continent. Now, before we carry on to Zeus, Zeus was shown as either an eagle or a bull or a swan. And no doubt he had lots of other disguises as well. Early one morning, Europa's walking along the seashore of ancient Lebanon and gathering flowers. There's some beautiful sea lilies, by the way, along the Mediterranean coast. I don't know if you've ever seen them. I've no doubt that's what they were. Zeus noticed this charming group, particularly Europa, who was the prettiest of the maidens. Zeus appeared to the group as a white bull, more beautiful than any other, smelling of flowers and lowing musically, so gentle that all the maidens rushed forward to pet it, as you do with white bulls that come out of the sea, lowing musically. But the bull laid down in front of Europa. She slid onto its back. Was that irresponsible or not? Instantly, the bull charged off, plunging into the sea, and began to swim rapidly from the shore. She realized that the bull must be a god. She pleaded with him to pity her. Zeus spoke and explained his love. He took her to Crete, where he had been raised. Polygamous Zeus, that's not in the original, by the way. Zeus had many women and many disguises. promised that she would bear him many famous sons who became gods of the underworld, or Hades. As you probably know, the Greek word in the Septuagint, the word we know as hell, wrongly, is Hades, or Sheol in Hebrew. So we'll rush on from that. Oh, I think there should have been a stepping stone between the two. But that was just showing you that Zeus is this same god. This is Baal, this is the eagle, this is the winged bull. Didn't have wings in that last clip. And Hathor is one of the Egyptian ones. And then this worship of the Asherah. Now this is the tree of life. This is another very, very common concept within Assyria, where you get a couple. One of the oldest stelae of all is actually Adam and Eve, from 2000, about 2100 of Adam and Eve around the tree of life with a serpent behind Eve. And that again is way before Moses put it all down in the Bible as we know it today, but those writings were certainly around at the time. So we see them around the tree of life here. And we note that he's got a circular symbol in his hand. And this became the Greek, the ankh, or the symbol of life. Again, once again, by the time we get to Hathor, the god, the bull, the cow goddess. In Egypt, we've got the crescent moon and the moon depicted as her horns. But the reason I put Asherah there, because in the book of Judges and Kings and Chronicles, it condemns the Midianites, the Ishmaelites, for cutting themselves in the Asherah festival. And they're still doing it. These are Shia Muslims. Not only cutting themselves to pieces, they're cutting their babies' heads open. And this is today, well, not today, literally. This is in the modern times. So the very festival of Asherah, sacrificing their children to Artemis, is still being symbolized by bloody Islam to this very day. This is not all Muslims, by the way, this is just a sect of the Shia. So they're literally cutting themselves and their children's heads open. Look at that little child down there. That is still going on today. It's unbelievable. But I say it was first condemned in the book of Judges and Kings. That's what the Midianites, the Ishmaelites, were doing back then. And it's all about spilling blood for the Queen of Heaven, whatever name you care to give to her. You could spell Asherah, Ashtaroth, or Artemis, or whatever. I think it's spelled Asherah like that in modern Islam. But it's nothing much has changed here. It's quite amazing. So this is what Allah and the satanic verses were still, well, we're bridging the gap here between BC and AD. The chief god in pre-Islamic Arabia was Hubal, or Allah, or both, or Sin, the moon god Sin, the Syrian god of the moon. So in the Kaaba, this is at Mecca, there were 360 idols. And when Muhammad came to power, he destroyed 359 of them, supposedly. Now, there are also three daughters of Hubal. These are in the so-called satanic verses, Alat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. Alat was the goddess associated with the underworld, the crescent moon, and Venus. Al-Uzza, the mightiest one, or the strong, was a fertility goddess called upon for protection and victory before war. I'll just give you a little clue here. This might be the god of fortresses of Daniel 11. It might be. And the image of the beast. It might be. Manat was the goddess of fate. The Quran mentions these goddesses as intercessors. The word actually, they don't really know what the word means. It actually also means cranes, as in the big birds, the big sacred birds. But they were daughters of Allah, because they were already worshipped in the Kaaba when Muhammad was taking power. So Allah is not a new god. Muhammad's father was called Abdallah, or servant of Allah, the God. Remember, Allah is not a name. It means Allah means the God. Now, what they were worshipping the Kaaba is interesting. Was a black stone, a meteorite. Now, if we look in Acts 19:35, and say you can get these slides later, you will say that the pagan worship of Artemis is of an image that fell down from heaven. A black stone, a meteorite. And again, this is common. And I'm sorry about these interesting asides, but there were very famous swords and knives made throughout history from meteorite nickel steel, because it's such good quality. So this worship of meteorites was practical as well, because they could make very good metal out of them. You know what Excalibur means? Excalibur means fallen from heaven, out of heaven. Excalibur was probably made of nickel steel from a meteorite. That's an interesting aside. If you don't want these interesting asides, please tell me, because I've got a multifaceted mind which never works together all the time, but likes to keep shooting off. You know? But that sort of pagan worship of an image that fell down from heaven is condemned in Acts 19:35, as well as condemned in the Judges, Chronicles, and Kings. So the satanic verses, we'll get to that later on, but they are in the Quran, and they do mention these three daughters of Allah. But of course, that a certain person got into trouble for mentioning that in the title of his books. Now later on, we'll also come to the fact that you could say that Babylon was in Berlin, because this is Hell's Gate, or the Ishtar Gate. It's got 337 serpent dragons on it. And this has been rebuilt stone by stone in Berlin. And after they rebuilt that, just by coincidence, of course, the First World War broke out. Now, when they rebuilt Satan's Seat in Berlin, you might recognize this from the Nuremberg Rally. Hitler had that rebuilt, not this particular one. This is the original, which has been rebuilt from Pergamon in Berlin. And Hitler did a copy of this, and then the Second World War broke out. So we've got Hell's Gate and Satan's Seat, both in Berlin. Could say that's a center of modern Babylon. Now, I don't know what the next. We're going to leave this one, because it's going to become very complicated again. No, I think we'll just look at the first. No, we will look at this one, I think, because it's an introduction to AD, as it were. When we look at Daniel 7 and 11, we see the fourth beast. Remember, that's the personified by Rome, pagan and papal. By the time we get to Revelation 13, that's the beast. Revelation 17, beast. Revelation 19. These are the same beasts. In Daniel 7 and 11, we've got the little horn. In 2 Thessalonians 2, I say my personal belief that little horn is the man of sin, or the man of lawlessness. In Revelation 13 and 17, it's called the second beast. Would appear to be, if we look at Revelation 17, the second beast is called the false prophet. By the time we get to Revelation 19, we get to the 8th head of the beast, which overcomes the second one, etc. We're going to look at that in the final bit. And I know that lots of people have different ideas. But Revelation 13 and 17 say that the first beast is out of the sea, because ancient Babylonian Sumerian worship was first out of the sea, was first out of fire and then out of water. And is that a coincidence? Because the first earth was destroyed by water, the second is going to be destroyed by fire. So this fire and water is another common theme, just to confuse things if you weren't confused enough already. So in Daniel 7, we've got the 10 horns. We've got the 10 horns in Revelation all the way through. We're not going to go into the 8th horn overcoming, etc. at this moment. But the 8th horn and king is generally thought re-emerges at the end of the Gentile times, i.e. in our times. there's this amazing recovery, this re-emergence. Remember, the first beast goes into the abyss, the second beast in Revelation comes out of the abyss and is transformed with most of the attributes of the first beast. Now, I didn't make all this complication up, by the way. That was the Bible. I'm just trying to interpret it and make it simple, and it's not simple, is it? No, it's not at all simple. So the eighth horn, now it has these qualities, what we call the qualities of the Antichrist. It speaks against God, it's blasphemous, changes times and laws. It changes times and laws in the old and the new. It defeats for laws, it does false signs and wonders, as in Thessalonians, and it gives us the mark of the beast, without which, of course, it will be illegal to either buy or sell. Now, these qualities, which you might call qualities, inverted commas, of the Antichrist, are common to the beast and Babylon, and the whore, and the false prophet, and the man of sin. So it's not just, I don't think it's just one final Antichrist. Again, that's just my own idea, because all of these qualities, which we think of as the Antichrist qualities, changing time and laws, etc. Islam has done that. Rome has done that. Napoleon tried to do that. Islam and Rome have both spoken against God and put themselves above God. They've both done so false signs and wonders. And they will get together, I believe, for a final mark of the beast. We already see, as we'll look at later, we already see Rome and Islam, for instance, coming together over Fatima. Fatima was one of the biological daughters of Muhammad. And Fatima, of course, is worshipped in Rome, the place where the false Mary appeared at the beginning of the 20th century. So I think that's quite enough for one evening. So I'll close down again for now. I say, don't worry, you can get all these slides later on via a PDF. They should be available possibly by tomorrow, but that will be up to Randall, who is the maitre d'.
Right. Do you want to take any more questions? Or?
Oh yes, if there's any questions or comments, please fire away. Yeah. I know there's an awful lot to take in.
Can you hear me, Philip?
Yes, yeah.
Yes. Okay, I think what you've shared is quite amazing. But my own concerns for myself are that there's too much to take in, because there are too many issues that I don't comprehend. So therefore, it's quite sad, really, because I'm obviously not getting as much from it as I might do if it was able to go more slowly and give more explanation of things as we go along.
Well, so, it's going to be in 3 parts, so it's, you know, it is a complex subject. It's firstly the story of the Bible and all history, isn't it?
But there's a lot of excess coming into it,
yeah,
as far as I'm concerned, from other things, and I feel that I'm sort of missing too much, which is a shame. But I think
I should cut out the asides in the future. Certainly cut out this. And remember, you'll be able to get the PDF sometime soon.
But some of your asides are really, really good. But that's my own feeling on it. And I think, as I say, it's very, very interesting. But for myself, all in one go, I could do with like 33 instead of 3.
I shall look very carefully at the next 2 bits and see. We might have to go on after Christmas or whatever.
I know you've got you've been dealing with it for a very long time.
Yeah, 40 years actually. Yes.
It's very, very different. Yes, we read all this in Scripture, and we don't all deal with the same parts of Scripture in the same way. And if you get too much of it all at once, it's a shame, because you would like to understand more of it. So I'm just sharing that, because you've got a lot of things to share, which
Mm.
is very interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Well, as I say, it's because I've not only been studying it for 40 years, I've been doing it, the false religion and the occultism and the drugs and all of that for a long time before that.
Yeah.
So this is like virtually my life. I'm writing a book about this as well. This has been my life, and the reason I've included so many names, I shall definitely cut aside the asides, but the reason I put all the names in, because you can go off and read a book somewhere and you say, oh, that person wasn't that, or this book says that he was that, or whatever. You find all of these names in all of these books. The books are confused, We're just trying to stick to the Bible, but trying to explain where all these different things have come into history and how they've influenced all of history. As Lucille said, Babylon is everywhere.
Oh yes, you
Everywhere.
can see that, can't you?
Yeah.
As you say, so many things come in the different names. They all refer back to the same thing.
The same thing, yeah.
Yes.
When you mentioned Hitler had rebuilt that property,
Yeah.
I mean, isn't there the Parathon rebuilt in somewhere in America? Begins, isn't it? But they're keeping this alive
Oh, yes.
today. Spending the money on rebuilding. This is the Parathon with. Can't remember. It begins with an N in America.
Well, there was an arch of Baal that was rebuilt in America and in London for a time.
Mm-hmm.
The Arch of Baal, remember that? What, 3-4 years ago?
St. George's Hall here in Liverpool is just a temple.
But the Palladium is a temple. We think of the Palladium, we think of annoying people like Bruce Forsyth, but it's actually false worship. It's actually all about false worship. The Palladium, all of these concepts, they're throughout all of society and history.
And of course, they're on the American dollar and things like that.
Oh, yes. The eye of Horus on the American dollar, in the pyramid. All of these concepts are still very much with us. The Freemasons are very much responsible for a lot of this, bringing all this sort of thing in. But it just, I'm trying to show how it infiltrates everything, and that's.
Yes, and it's extremely hard to do that in a short time, isn't it? I can understand. It's very interesting.
Actually, you're very fortunate, because I normally do it in one talk.
Oh well, I'd have been out then, like a light.
No, I do it from the history of art. You can tell the entire history of the human race in images of animals and birds and beasts. The entire history, from the caves all the way through to now.
Amazing, isn't it?
It's simplicity itself. We've always used these same images, of eagles and bulls and what have you, throughout all of history.
Amazing, isn't it?
That's what I'm trying to show, the commonality of it all.
The account of Noah's Ark, isn't it, in all the different societies all around the world? As they split up from Babylon, they took it with them. It's
one of the first books I read was Secrets of the Lost Races by René Nurburgren, and he was the one that pointed me to the Bible, because he kept pointing out how common these legends of Noah were throughout the earth. In fact, he said there were over 700 accounts of a global flood in the world, and he wrote this book about 30 odd years ago. But it was that pointed me to the Bible. Talk about the geology and the mythology of the flood being common all over the world.
Yeah, I understand that.
the split from Babylon, and confusion of the language.
Yeah.
Same story, just different names.
Well, that's another aspect which will come in later. God confused their speech at Babylon because they said there is nothing that they will not be able to do.
Mm.
And now that we have Babylon reconfigured in the world today with a common language, English, the language of Latin, the language of science, common languages, there is nothing. They're already saying we're going to put our consciousness into computers and become immortal. I mean, they're insane, but they think they're going to do it, you know. And we've already got an idea of what they're going to do, taking over the world and the Great Reset and everything. We already have a very good idea.
Rule the world, that's and it's the common interest, it's the environment.
But that's just a part of it. You know, it's part of the worship. Gaia, the goddess Gaia, yet another goddess.
I remember being rebuked for saying, study the Bible now, the Lord's come again like a thief in the night. And I was told, well, you can't say that in a Jesuit school. It's because they're waiting for the Pope to give the nod for him to come.